welcome to our second webinar on multi-ethnic worship. We're so excited that you chose to be with us today. Hey, my name is Santis Beatty, and I have the awesome privilege of serving as the Director of Multi-Ethnic Ministries for the Wesleyan Church. And man, we're excited about this lineup that we have for you today. One of the things I want to say to you is each Monday, over the course of the next several weeks, we'll have an opportunity to hear from panelists, and we'll be doing learning labs and learning and growing. We believe that leaders are learners, and at the point in which we stop learning is really at the point we stop leading. And so thank you for your investment of time and energy. I want to say also that last week we had a great time with 4 panelists. Today we have 6 panelists who are going to share a little bit of their experience and share a little bit of their process of how they do ministry, particularly in a multi-ethnic setting. And so we strategically sought out voices of people from different backgrounds, different levels of experience. You'll have people who have had over 25 years of experience and some who've only had a few. You'll have urban, suburban, and rural. You'll have small church, mid-sized church, large church. You'll have mono-ethnic, multi-ethnic, and ethnic specific. And we know that these leaders who are sharing today, their story is not the only story. So this is no prescription for your church, but what we believe is that you will have something, some kind of experience that hopefully that will inspire you or give you some tools to be what God has called you to be in your particular context. So I want to introduce to you someone that's really special to us. Her name is Josemar Trent, and she's going to share how you can help out by giving your questions in the chat room and those kind of things. So tell us a little bit more about how we do that, Josemar.
Thanks, Santis. Yes, as he mentioned, my name is Josemar Trent, and I am the assistant to Santis Beatty in the Multi-Ethnic Ministries, and as well, I am a translation specialist for Church Multiplication and Discipleship. In this webinar, we love the interactive feature of it. So there is an opportunity for you to get involved with each of the panelists today, and to the right, at the bottom of your screen, you will see there is a chat, and you will be able to direct your questions to them or also on the Q&A. Each speaker will introduce themselves first, and then each will take a little time to talk about their journey and in their specific context. We'll field a few questions from the ones that you send them and ask them specifically after each presentation. And then after all of our speakers have shared, we'll also share your questions for the entire group.
Thank you, Josemar. So don't be shy. Ask your questions, ask them during and following each presentations. We want to hear from you. We want to leave at least about 30 minutes at the end for questions for the entire panelists, but feel free to jump in and ask a question while they're speaking. So with that in mind, let's jump in. I'm so excited to introduce this lineup, and actually they're going to introduce themselves, but I'm going to start with Brant Porter from Kentwood Community Church. Brant, would you just share a little bit of your story and a little bit of the context of ministry that you're in?
I'm Brant Porter over at Kentwood Community Church in Grand Rapids. Back in 2005, we were a contemporary mega church in a primarily Dutch conservative region. And when the church was started, we started in a cornfield. There was nothing around, and the surrounding community was built up, and it changed over time. And so at some point we realized the local high school was speaking 55 different languages. And we were looking at our church, and KCC was 99% white. And our lead pastor, Wayne Schmidt, some of you guys know him, he felt like God was asking him, look, if KCC were to be removed from the community, would the surrounding neighborhood even notice? And his answer was really troubling for him. And it was kind of his holy discontent moment. God placed us there specifically in that community. So he decided, no, we really need to reach and reflect those around us. So we all sat around the table and we said, yeah, we understand it. We get the why. Let's do this. But we were all a bunch of white people, and we had no clue how in the world we were going to do it. So I know I only have a short time with you, but I kind of want to make sure that I give you something today. So I made a few notes. So one of the first things we tried to do is the worship experience. We realized some things had to change on how we do things. So here's what we do. So in regarding to songs, on any given weekend, we'll do a black gospel, contemporary rock, a Latin samba or something like that. We do updated hymns, and we strategically weave them all together, which is really difficult to do because you don't want it to feel like, oh, you're a black person, this is for you now. And oh, you're Latin, here you go. This is your little token element. So it takes probably four or five times longer than the process was before, because we're really trying to make it an art form where it doesn't feel, where it really flows. Another thing is languages. We'll do translation with headsets so people can come and they can hear a variety of languages in their headsets. We'll sing in Swahili and Hindi and Spanish, and we'll do in English. If we're singing something in English, most every time we'll put another language, a second language, we'll make it appear just as a second line, not as a subtitle, but as in another color, that just in addition to the English that we show. For an easy fix is just instrumentation. So we'll introduce like tabless drums or a didgeridoo or a thumb piano or the synthesizer, which is really simple. Just use unique sounds from a variety of cultures. Just weave them into the songs that you do. The visuals on stage, on the screen, the presenters, the people that are speaking, they all have to represent this ethnic diversity. So for us, everything communicates that no matter what your ethnicity, you value. So we want someone that's sitting in the congregation to be able to look up on the platform or look at whatever's happening and say, that's me, I'm there. So in the early days, that meant, and still today, that means there are a lot of things and a lot of good people that we don't use because they don't represent this value of ethnic diversity for us. So maybe you're like us, you're asking, well, what do you do? We don't have very much diversity in our congregation. You need to go get it. It's going to take hard work. So for me, I still do this to this day. There's a day of the week that I get outside the walls of the church and I work out in the community. I'll go to a coffee shop in an ethnically diverse part of the neighborhood, volunteer in music programs, local music programs. We still do that. Get a Craigslist ad. Put a Craigslist ad in the musician section in your region. Go to an English as a second language class. You got to build relationships. Go to where ethnically diverse musicians and artists are, and you have to insert yourself. And not just you, have your volunteers do the same. You got to cast a vision, you got to motivate, you got to empower people. You can't do it all by yourself. So in some instances, and this is kind of taboo, you may have to pay for it. Okay, so let's just be real. Pioneering is tough. So if you have to pay $50 or $200 a month, whatever, for an ethnically diverse brother or sister as an intern or a musician, it helps them and it helps you. Let's be real. They have something you don't have. They have a good heart for God. They have amazing talents, but they don't look or act or think like you. And that is hugely valuable. It is hugely valuable. You may have to pay for it. You may have to create the culture you want until it comes naturally. A lot of people don't want to face that reality, but it may be. It may be. So what do we do? What if you do if people complain that ethnically diverse brothers and sisters are getting paid for the same thing that I'm doing? Why do they get paid? So we didn't publicize the compensation part of it, but we were always honest about it when we were confronted about it. So it's going to require some sincerity, a commitment to it, and really following the Holy Spirit in your decisions, your choices, and your conversations. In my experience, if you can just tenderly expose your hearts and really just show your intentions, be just upfront about it. Be real about the reality and where you need to go. The reality is you may be able to pray and God's going to bring diverse people into your congregation. Awesome. But just saying that you're a multi-ethnic congregation may not happen unless you make some really hard decisions. You're going to have to allow change of your choices, your values, your systems, everything. So for us, we had to ask questions like, does this system encourage all cultures or really only appeal to just one? Is this a task-driven scenario or is it a relationship-driven? Because different cultures value different things. So you can't just have one. Is it a strict time frame or is it flexible? Does this event, are we really saying you got to be here at this time? Or are we saying we're structuring it so much that, you know what, any time within this time is a good thing? Those are all things that you have to continually be asking. Like for instance, what about communication? Does this communicate to all cultures? Like we had refugees that were in our community that didn't even have a computer. How are we going to get information to them? Try to remove those barriers as best as you can. So another thing for us, so that's like first level. So that's worship experience. And some of you are in that and you're trying to figure out how to change your worship experience. For us, we made some ground in the time period. God's really done some awesome things. But here's the challenge we have. There's worship experience and there's worship family. It's not enough that you just look diverse. It's not enough that you just have ethnic diversity on your platform. Our challenge is to integrate that so that we're doing life together, integrating off the platform. That is like hugely difficult. Otherwise, you're just going to swim in assumptions and stereotypes. You're like, oh, there's a black guy. He must like this kind of music. There's 80 shades of black guy. There's like a million cultures within the African-American community. You can't make those kind of stereotypes. Get to know people and you'll get to another level. So here's some of the things that we did. So we do these small group discipleship things. We call them breaking bread events. They're simple, like 2.5 hours. You always have food. Food is a great way to bring in culture. Everybody loves food. And then we do a discipleship Bible study time. So for us, we hand select the invite. We don't just create an event and invite people. We hand select those that are going to be coming and gathering together. It allows us to be more intentional and integrate that a little bit better. So I really encourage you to do that. Another thing we do is Love Ninjas. So Love Ninjas is 5 or 6 people, normally on a Sunday, that their mission, secret, covert mission, you contact them ahead of time and you say, on your off time, when you're not on the platform, your job is to connect people to other people. That's it. You're going to walk the room, you're going to walk around, and your job is to go to the people on the fringe, whether it's temperament or ethnic diversity or whatever it is. You know, people like to be on their phones and they, you know, when they're uncomfortable, we go get them. And these 5 or 6 people will strategically just go have conversations, or they'll grab, say, hey, come with me and we'll just go talk to this person. And that's all they do. We do that all the time. We do another thing called Which One Is It? And what we'll do is we'll get four or five people ethnically diverse, culturally diverse, and we'll say, give us 5 or 6 things that are unique to you, and write them down. And they write down these things. And then what we'll do is like, so some of the things would be like, I have 5 or 6 brothers and sisters, or I speak 4 languages, or I've been to 17 Justin Bieber concerts, whatever it is, something unique. And then we put these people in front of a large group and we read the things randomly and we say, now which one of these 4 or 5 people is it? And the group votes. It's an awesome way to just get to know those people, but also tear down stereotypes. It's awesome. It's hilarious. Another thing that we do is include other cultures in the process. So like if you need a song translated, go find someone in that native tongue to translate it for you. Well, like, I don't have anybody in my church that speaks that language. Great. Go find somebody that does. It's an awesome way to get out in the community, especially if you have to teach it to your congregation. Have them come. Well, they don't go to my church. Invite them anyway. Maybe they'll come. A lot of people will. In our decision-making process, like when we're choosing our songs for the year, we do it all in the context of ethnically diverse. We vote on it. We get people from other cultures to vote on the songs that we're going to do. We rarely make a decision in the worship arts that doesn't have ethnic diversity around the table. Rarely ever. Because I think a certain way and they're going to think a different way, and it makes us better. And we hit the mark more often than not. Last thing, and this is really quick. network. You've got to network. Why are you recreating the wheel trying to figure this out from scratch? Get a community of people that are doing the journey the same way that you. That's the great thing about technology, is you can connect. You can share logins to certain sites and Planning Center and all that. You can share resources. And if you're a copyright person, you're really freaking out right now. So I'm ignoring that, but share your stuff, share your projects, because if you don't have to recreate the wheel, and some people have already pioneered that for you, you can spend more time in relationships and in discipleship. Okay, that's it. I'm out of time. I know I'm overdue. Go, you got it. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Brand. Great stuff, man. Great stuff. Next up is Felicia Sims, who is a worship director in Greensboro, North Carolina at Christ Wesleyan Church. And she's going to share a little bit of her story and just the process of how they do ministry in their context.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Santis. Thank you for having me here. I tell you, this is such an honor to get to share and kind of talk about, my journey. My name is Felicia Sims. My husband and I have been serving at Christ Wesleyan Church in Greensboro, North Carolina for about 8 years. A little bit of our background. We came from an all-Black church. I started in worship probably about 15 years ago. And the awesome thing is I kind of walked into the worship team, and it was kind of where we were all kind of figure out what's going on. What do we do? And I tell you, that's the best thing, because that's when everybody is totally dependent upon the Holy Spirit about, okay, what is this worship thing? How do we do this thing? And so that's how I began in worship. The church that we were at planted another church. And so I ended up becoming the worship leader at that church. And so gave me another platform. And so just wonderful experiences in terms of my establishing worship in my life and relationship in my life with the Lord Jesus. We came to Christ Wesleyan Church. Just a quick story how we came there. My son, who is now 14, but then he was about 7, was looking to play soccer, and found out Christ Wesleyan had a upward soccer program. And so we ended up going there, checking their program out. At the time at our church, we knew God was about to transition us. We didn't know quite where. But anyway, during this season of soccer, my children looked at us and was like, oh, when are we going to visit this church? Because they had met kids and they were playing around and so of course this is a majority white church. And so we were like, hey, cool, let's go visit. And so I tell you, my husband and I walked through the door and we sat down and we literally looked at each other and said, this is where God is calling us. And I tell you, to come from a homogeneous Black church to a homogeneous white church, it was like, wow, but it was exciting just knowing, because it was no doubt in our minds that we knew God was placing us right where we were at that time. And I tell you, it has been a wonderful journey. Our church, we're quite not where Brent is right now. I tell you, I am a part of the worship team. The worship leader, Star Cromer, does a wonderful job in trying to incorporate different things. I know when she came to the church, they were actually in the process of actually coming from traditional to contemporary. And so you still have that element of in church there, where we're trying to kind of transition, from the traditional side of things into the contemporary. And so when my husband and I got there, they were kind of in that transition, still a little pushback, because you have older traditional people in the congregation that still want to hear hymns and stuff. And so I think our worship director does a wonderful job in incorporating the hymns, even trying to bring them up to date so that the older crowd doesn't feel like they're left behind. And then also trying to incorporate a lot of the contemporary sound so that the young people can adapt to something. And also, she's allowed me some room to bring in some songs, some William McDowell songs, Israel songs. We've done just some variety of things that kind of work for us, not necessarily saying that it has to be gospel, because honestly, when I started singing praise and worship, I didn't start singing gospel praise and worship. It was really a lot of the Hillsong stuff, Michael W. Smith, and that was what I started singing before I even heard those songs. Those are the kind of songs that I was used to singing. So when I came to Christ Wesleyan, I was like, oh, I know these songs. Yes. I was excited. And so, So I think it was Joel that said last week about a new sound and trying to find that sound that works for your church. And I think that's where we are. You know, we're just trying to find that sound that works for our church. And I have the privilege also of, you know, leading our youth in the worship. We started something a couple of years ago where our youth wasn't really involved in worship on Wednesday nights, because that's our big youth night on Wednesdays. And so we started an element of worship for them. And so it's been really fun, you know, bringing youth together and helping to lead worship with them. You have these babies that, you know, have never been up on a stage. You know, they have stepped out in faith and, you know, in courage. And because it's not easy to get before your peer group, especially other youth who are looking at you like, what are you doing? You know, that sort of thing. And they have just gotten up there and done the thing. It has just been a privilege and an honor to just be up amongst the young people, sharing and doing worship with them. And I've had an opportunity to kind of introduce some different songs to that worship team. And so that's been, it's been good. It's been a challenge, you know, for a lot of us. Our worship team is, normally we read, you know, everything is by read on music, you know, sheet music. And so it's kind of hard when you may want to bring in songs that don't necessarily have any sheet music to it, and you have to kind of use that ear. And so that's kind of where I think about what Brent was saying. You know, you have to be intentional about, you know, the things you want to bring into your praise group to make it known, you know, the things you're trying to get across to everybody. Our community has probably, I don't know, 50 different, maybe 100. We're across the street from a school, Smith High School, that represents probably 100 different nationalities just in that school alone. And so our church is probably over 100 years old. So we're talking a traditional white church over 100 years old when they were in this community. And it started out as a holiness church, a white holiness church, then became a Wesleyan church. And so it's really steeped in tradition. And I tell you, you know, when you think of 100 years ago, what the community probably looked like then and what it looks like now is like night and day. And so what I love about our church and our pastor Ken Klein, what we're doing is just trying to figure out where we all fit in this community, in this church. You know, how do we reach our community? You know, what are they looking for? What is needed in our community? We've had lots of visitors coming through. You know, what is it that they're looking for? How do we keep them there? And, you know, music is a big part of that. You know, when they come through the doors, that's the first thing they hear is, you know, music is one of the first things that they hear. And if that captures them, then, and they hear something that, you know, keeps their interest, then most likely they're going to come back. And a lot of times if, you know, there's something that they feel like they can't really relate to, then they're, you know, they don't come back. And so we're really, we're in that place. A lot of the things that I tell you, Brent said, it really gets my attention because I was jotting down things, because we have these conversations all the time about, you know, how do we do this? You know, how? Because we really don't know. We really do not know. And so anyway, that's where we are, you know, with our church. And it's just been, for me, I would just say personally, it's been a growing experience to be loved on by people that are that don't necessarily look like me, that don't sound like me, don't have the same background as me. And coming from a home, you know, an all-black church, to basically kind of an all-white church that is working towards being multi-ethnic, because we are working, it's headed in that direction. I tell you, it has been mind-blowing and eye-opening, the love of God, that I tell you, love does, it casts out fear, because when love is present, you are ready to go and just go forth. You know what? You go in boldness, you try things. If it doesn't work, it's okay. Try something different, you know, and I think that's where we are. We're ready to try whatever we can to move forward in ministry for our community and make sure that our community has what it needs in our church. And so, but anyway, that's where we are with Christ Wesleyan.
Thank you. Thank you, Felicia. Felicia is one of those, and we won't ask her the question now. We'll just give her a chance to think about it. And this came up last week, and I'm sure people are thinking about it too. Most of our churches, Felicia, are the size of Christ Wesleyan or smaller. And you are a person that volunteers. You know, you don't get any pay. You volunteer your time to lead the youth a worship component. And so I want you to think about how would you respond to a church that says, you know what, we don't have the funds, we don't have a ton of experience, we don't have a lot of time because most of our folks work full-time jobs. And so just be thinking about how would you respond to the methods and how you do worship at Christ Wesleyan, which is actually my church now. So Felicia is actually a part of our team. And so just be prepared to share that after we get done with these introductions and folks share. I definitely want to hear from you on that. Chase Stansel is up next, and he's going to share a little bit of his context. He's at Unison Christian Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and just thankful for him. So tell us a little bit of your story and your context of ministry, Chase.
Good to be here. This is the first time I've ever done a webinar. I have participated from an observer standpoint, but this is the first time that I am working this camera. So, I keep looking at myself like, make sure I ain't got nothing in there. But anyway, so glad to be here. I get the privilege of serving as the lead pastor of Unison Christian Church. I have served in worship arts, though, for most of ministry life for me. I started serving in leadership and worship arts when I was 17. I'm 30, I'll be 32 this year, so we're coming up on 15 years of that. And it has been a really cool thing to see God use that in my life. I've grown so much in just being able to not only use that gift, but also to grow in leadership in that area. When I first started serving in leadership and worship arts, I was at a small church plant in Grand Rapids, Michigan, called Christ-like Outreach Ministries. And when I say small, I'm like, we had 50 people on paper, it was like 20 people there. Basically, my wife, Christine, and I were the only one not blood related to the pastor. But that is how I learned. That's where I learned how to lead. It was with those individuals taking, the first time I visited was the day of my 17th birthday, and the pastor heard me singing in the back. There was no musician. It was a bunch of people singing a cappella, old school gospel songs, and he heard me singing in the back, and he like basically trapped me in a corner and said, "Please stay." And I did. I was there for about 5 years. It was a great journey. I learned a lot. And it was just a great space. And so, anywho, from there I started. I participated in an internship actually with Kentwood Community Church. So Brant was he was on his go out and get them game, and I was a part of a music group that I started called His Air, and Kentwood Community Church invited us to come and sing a few times, and Brant invited me to be a part of the internship there. And that honestly was a huge culture shift. When Felicia talked about going from an all black church to a predominantly white church, let me tell you something else. Like, that was huge. So I was really working with two different things at the same time, going from a church of 20 on an average attendance to a church of 2,000 on an average attendance. And that is no easy transition. I often tell people that after a Sunday worship service, I would hide in the back because there were so many people, and it was so incredibly difficult for me to navigate there was just so many different emotions. So as a worship leader, I think one of the things that when we are being intentional about growing in diversity, just recognizing that is a part of the puzzle for people coming from a homogeneous church going into a multi-ethnic or a transitioning church, especially if it's a different size. You've got so much happening. The individuals that were coming, they were coming to me after a service to be encouraging, but there's like 80 of them. And they're like, we've never heard that music before. We've never heard this. We've never done that. Who are you? And what's your name? And where are you from? Like, look, I need to go around somewhere and sit down and be quiet because I am overwhelmed. And so that was a unique part of the journey for me. And I would say that it will probably be a part of the journey for a lot of people coming into a ministry that's transitioning, especially for some of our larger churches. So, anywho, that was that part. I was at KCC for about 7.5 years or so, participated in the launch of their Wyoming campus, and from there launched Unison Christian Church. We're about 2 years old, will be 2 in April. We intentionally launched Multiethnic. That was very much a part of who not just myself, but a part of the people, like the part of the people who felt called to kind of come along with to launch this inner city ministry. It was just as much a passion of theirs as it was of myself and my wife. And so for us, it was a non-negotiable. When we had conversations with people about what them joining the church plant and being a part of launching Unison, it was not a hidden. There were no hidden figures. It was intentional. So we had conversations. I sat with people at Big B, a coffee place here in West Michigan, and said, "Hey, we absolutely want you to be a part of Unison because you are gifted with children. We absolutely want you to be a part of Unison because you want to see inner city churches thriving and developing. We love that you're interested in urban ministry, but I also love that you're Hispanic. I love that you're Puerto Rican and your husband is Dominican. Like, I love that you are Black and your wife is white. I love," and while that it can be taboo, at the end of the day, we erred on the side of intentionality and transparency. If you are going to be a part of a multi-ethnic church, you cannot in any way hide behind political correctness when it comes to the idea of being multi-ethnic. This just is who we are. When we had our first, preview services and things like that, I preached a sermon about being about unity, and one of the things that we talked about, it was close to Thanksgiving. And so I said, I want to see our green bean casserole and arroz con gandules and our collard greens and all on the same plate. Not because I like messy food as much, but it's because there's something about our flavors being able to be in the same space at the same time. And yes, rubbing on each other. And yes, it feels awkward at times. And yes, it feels like we don't know exactly what we're doing because that is what it is. We don't always know what we're doing because we're learning. But I didn't want any of that to sneak up on people. So I would have rather launched with a small group of people who were dedicated to understanding what we're doing than to launch with hundreds of people who would unfortunately find out by surprise in a couple of weeks after we launched that, oh, he really did mean multi-ethnic. Yeah, no, we meant it from the beginning. And so for us, that journey of being intentional about it started with inviting people with that very bold transparency, but also has continued with that. Now we've got a really thriving multi-ethnic little baby church that I lovingly say that every area every ethnicity that you see on the census, we have at Unison, which is great. We love seeing that. And not just from a cosmetic standpoint, we want to see the cultures of these individuals thriving within the context of Unison too. One of the things that we found is that launching this way has also made a space for multi-ethnic families to have room where perhaps they didn't find before. One of the couples that's there at Unison, they said that everywhere they go, they are forced to choose an ethnicity. And so a Black husband and a white wife, if they go over to the Black family's home, they have to be Black. If they go to the white family's home, they have to be white. They go to the grocery store, the first person that they talk to, that's the one that they decide. So they decide that they're Black. That's how they feel. But at home, they get to be multi-ethnic. At home, they get to be Black and white and anything else that shows up in the house. And at Unison, this is the first time they felt that type of freedom. And so for us, we work really hard to make sure that type of freedom is a part of the culture. And it's with intentional conversations. It's with choosing songs that are not just, that absolutely have different languages, but we mix and match different styles of songs. And so we'll sing a song that is a pretty well-known song, but we'll throw a reggae feel on it. And we'll sing a song like, a Chris Tomlin song, and we'll throw Latin feel on it, because we got quite a few Hispanic individuals that are part of our ministry. And so it becomes this place where we're not like, for us, the journey has been this transparency, this boldness, but also living in this space of creativity, because in truth, nothing like what we see around us. And so it's this thing where we constantly are going before God, okay, how do we live out this, this space in such a way that you are honored, first of all, God, but also that freedom exists within the culture here. So that's us.
I think you do bring a unique voice to this as a recent church planter who intentionally planted multi-ethnic. I think that's the experience of some of our viewers, and it's also important to just know that you have a lead pastor who also is concerned about worship and the commitment. Most of us know that typically in the context of a weekend service, the two people that have the most airtime is the worship leader and the pastor, right? Sometimes it's the same person, but often it's two different people. And so having in sync with your heart for multi-ethnic ministry, multi-ethnic worship, and being someone who is leading the church in terms of teaching and administrative, et cetera, it's pretty amazing. So next we have Abby Grayla, who is who is a part of Tribes Church in Rockford, Michigan. And we're really thankful for her and just her heart for ministry. So why don't you just share a little bit of your story, Abby, and just your context and how you do what you do.
Hey, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. So my name is Abby Grayla, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this white bubble that I grew up in. And, being that I'm white, I'm going to kind of give this perspective of what that's looked like, and then the transition into this reality that is different than the white bubble. So I did grow up in a white family with mostly white everything around us, and that's just what we knew, and that's what we had. But there were always these little glitches. Like, for instance, my mom was a part of a gospel choir when I was in the womb. And so when I was young, I just recognized that there was a difference in music that I was attracted to, this gospel, this R&B flair. We had some Black neighbors that I enjoyed getting to know their daughter, and they would have get-togethers, and I'd go over to their place and see everybody get together, and they taught me the Running Man. And I didn't have that at my house. I didn't have that in our bubble, in our community. But it was something that I felt like was part of who I wanted to be, and something that was missing from my life. So I kind of relate it to some movies, if you've seen The Truman Show or The Matrix, that there's kind of this tunnel vision of reality that's not a reality for everyone. And so over the past couple years, I've been able to step outside of that and learn some different things that I didn't know before. So saying that, going into a little bit of church history, I grew up in some smaller churches with a little bit of diversity, but again, mostly that white thing. And then about 20 years ago or so, 15, 20 years ago, I got to be a part of Res Life. And, there was a little bit of diversity, and then Ken Reynolds came into the picture, and he brought some of his stuff. But that's really where I got to learn leading worship and watching them and how they did things and adding some languages. But a couple years ago, I ran into Julian Newman, who's my pastor now, and just took a completely different, he just taught me so many new things that were already in my heart, because God put those things there and that grace was there. But I didn't know how to verbalize it, because again, I grew up in that white bubble. So it's kind of like how Neo in the Matrix, he had to really have some growing pains and learning and some serious searching to learn the truth about his real place in life. And that's a process. So I kind of want to just share a couple little scriptures. Ephesians 2:14 through 3:11 uses phrases like, he broke down the wall of hostility that separated us. Our hostility towards each other was put to death. We're carefully joined together in him. He uses his wisdom in its rich variety. And then in Revelation 7, it talks about multi-ethnic and multi-generational worship as God's heart and his design. So how does that incorporate, or how do I use that in worship leading? I'm going to give you 3 things that I've learned. And one of them is becoming a listener and a learner. Growing up in what I call the white bubble has caused me to have tunnel vision. It's caused me to have perceptions. But the truth is, all of us have different ideas. We have different gift sets. We all have different characteristics. We have different paradigms, realities, traumas, different things that we've grown up seeing. Not everybody's going to see the same thing the same way. And it's just a waste of our time to try to make people think the way that we do. What's more valuable is listening to other people and learning their perspective and recognizing that there's more than one road to get to the same place. So there's more than one way to look at it. And just becoming a learner. I do life with people that don't look like me. I go to Detroit and hang out with my friends that live there, and I eat greens, beans, potatoes, tomatoes. Did I say that right? You know, we eat different things. I worship with them, so they have a totally different culture. I learn from that. We're stronger together. We have collective strength. But the enemy wants us to separate and divide, because he knows that there's unity and there's a blessing when we come together. There's blessing when we come together in unity. So I'm really intentional. None of us are going to think the same. So I'm intentional again to learn and to listen. I come with curiosity, purity, humility instead of indictment. A lot of the time when people have conversations, I see a lot of indictment and people want to point the finger and blame, but we really just have to learn how to come together in humility and, you know, just learn from each other. Brant brought up paying for diversity. We have definitely done that. We've paid for diversity in our worship, and we not only pay for diversity, but we have created relationships with different people. So that's a huge part of what we do. The second thing is that I've become very, very, very conscious of worship sets, our worship team, who gets the solo, the style, the paraphernalia, all of it. So we're not just doing one thing. We're trying to like make our whole service look and feel like a place where everybody can feel welcome. And it takes time and it takes a lot of effort and energy. It's like pushing a boulder up a mountain, and then, you know, eventually it will become natural and it'll be something that will create momentum on its own. So these are some questions that I ask myself, and I'm going to go pretty quickly. So if you'd like to have these notes, I'm more than happy to give them to you via email if you want to shoot your email over. So one of the questions that I ask is, does the worship set represent more than one culture? Several different people have brought to light the fact that it's an art to mesh and meld different cultures together, but you have to do that. One of the ways that we do that is keeping songs in a similar key. You know, a lot of gospel music is like C# or A flat. We try to maybe put that in a different key to have all the same keys, or we try to take our contemporary Christian music and put it in C# or A flat or whatever, so that it all flows in the same key. That really helps us to blend cultural music, multicultural music together. One of the things that we look at is who writes these songs, who sings this version. Are we visually diverse on the platform as much as we can be? And again, going out and finding diversity and getting to know and building relationships with people that don't look like you, eat like you, talk like you, have not lived like you. What can we do to make people feel welcome in our church? Are we welcoming? Are the people that are at the front door, are they diverse? Do we have people like the Love Ninjas out just to introduce people to one another, so that you know, we don't get stuck in our comfort zones? A lot of time we get stuck in our comfort zones. This is what I'm familiar with, so this is what I'm going to stick with. And even being a bubbly person myself, I have to be super, super intentional to make sure that I say, hey, what's up? And get to know people that don't look like me, and learn about who they are, and express genuine interest, because I am genuinely interested, you know, and hang out together and go to their house and bring, you know, a dish to pass. And just getting outside of our comfort zone is super, super important. one of the things that we ask ourselves is what styles are represented on our team. And I literally mean style. I'm not talking about music. At our church, I'm at Tribes Church in Grand Rapids, and we're a church plant. We're diverse, but we've really had to grow to be diverse because we're in Rockford. That's not where we wanted to plant, but that's what God opened the door for. And it's been a really beautiful, it's a really beautiful story that I don't have time to go into right now, but we literally don't discriminate style. On the platform, we basically have rules towards modesty, and that's it. So if you want to wear your snapback, if you want to wear your jeans with holes, if you want to wear your dress coat, that's fine. Wear whatever represents your style. And that's another way that we add and bring diversity to our atmosphere and our culture at Tribes Church. Do our graphics and our paraphernalia not only represent other ethnicities, but also feature other ethnicities? That's super, super important, to feature other ethnicities. Are we being intentional to teach our team different styles? You know, it's sometimes uncomfortable to sing something that we're not used to. We've got two worship leaders at our church. I'm one of them, and then we have Dwight Hudson, and he's Black, and I'm white. So we've recognized that we attract what we are. We attract Black men and white women on our team, and we're working at expanding that and bringing in all other cultures and ethnicities as well. But for the white women who aren't used to singing gospel music, are we teaching them, you know, why do we modulate so many times in this song? Why are we elongating this like this? Or why are we cutting it off like that? Why are we not singing this part of this song with vibrato? It's important to educate our teams and do what I would call maybe the foundational work behind the scenes. And, you know, we do that with our musicians as well. Why are we playing this song this way? Are we allowing our musicians to just play any old thing that they want to? No, we don't. We don't do that. We say, this is the style that we're going for, and we are specific with what we want different musicians to play. And side note, we've had not really kickback with that, but there was a particular musician on our team who didn't really understand it and wanted to just flow and do his thing. What we've learned to do is say, you have this space in this song to do whatever you want, and you can make it your thing. But there are other times where it's important that we do exactly what the audio track that we're trying to replicate is doing, because if we don't do that, then we're not going to successfully show the style of that different song. So, you know, there's place for both. Let's see here. I've got my notes. You know, we're intentional with our music, not only reaching ethnicities, but also generations, hymns, as well as younger music, the electro pop, the hip hop, bringing in different people from different churches to display different styles. And what I've noticed is that in Rockford, especially in the first couple of years, we're predominantly white. It's a predominantly white area, but we have different people coming in from different parts of Rockford and all over Grand Rapids, and blended families that are saying, man, this is so refreshing. We're so happy that you guys are here, because there's nothing like this in this area. And so we have definitely catered more to the minority in our church as far as music, and featuring ethnicities in our paraphernalia, in our graphics, and in our movies, and in our examples. But that has grown to be a huge benefit for us, because we're growing in our diversity, and we're really seeing it at this time. So there's a few practicals that I wanted to give you. I'm a list person, so it really helps me. A few artists that we pull from, just a few of them, are Israel Houghton. We also do music from Bethel and Redding, Amanda Cook, Kelly Healing, I don't even know how to say her name, but she did Everbee. We like her. Kim Walker-Smith, Fred Hammond, Freddie Rodriguez, Lakewood, Passion Worship, Hillsong, and Young and Free, including Brooke Ligertwood, William McDowell. We love all of them. So we pull music from them. And then also we do connect with our friends that speak different languages, and we ask them to help us with translations. And sometimes we'll add different feel to different worship as well. So that's me. That's what we're doing. And we love it, and it's working really well for us. And there you go.
So the next up is Luigi. Luigi is a part of the seminary staff at Wesley Seminary at Indiana Wesleyan University, just has a great story in his approach to ministry. He's not a full-time worship pastor or worship director, but has a unique contribution to this. I'll ask him to share, and then we'll close out with Mark.
Hey everyone, my name is Luigi, and I'm not Italian, and I don't have a brother named Mario. I'm originally from Colombia, South America, so yes, I am Hispanic. And being from Colombia, people often ask me if I love drinking coffee, and I mean, I love drinking coffee. That's it. Every morning I need to have a big cup of coffee. The stronger, the better. And being from Colombia, people always like to ask me if I've ever done drugs. I don't know why that always comes up. The answer is no. How about you? I'm just joking. Anyways, we're talking about the multi-ethnic worship. And let me just tell you a little. I came to the United States as an international student and went to Bible college in a really tiny community. And we started planning a church at a university town. And I became the worship pastor of the church plant before I learned English. So I was, I don't know how that happened, but they asked me, could you start leading worship in this church plant? And I was just now really learning the language. And as you can imagine, when I would get really nervous, I would start speaking Spanish and nobody would understand. And it was a big mess, a small church that started from nothing. But I was leading this congregation in worship. And what ended up happening was really unique, something that many of the panelists have said is you begin to attract people that are similar. And the reality, I was probably the only Latino in the beginning, but it was a university town and we started doing ministry among international students. And if you're asking the question, where do I start? If you're close to a university, I would encourage you to begin thinking international students. They generally come highly educated, are really open to conversations. And one of the things that happened to us is we began to do a lot of ministry among international students. And that brought such a range of diversity in that particular church that was really unique. And we started seeing God just opening new opportunities of changing even in the vision and the mission of the church. After that, I lived in Los Angeles, and I lived in Los Angeles for, I think, 14 years. And in Los Angeles, let me just backtrack. I'd never heard of the term multi-ethnic church or multi-ethnic worship. In Los Angeles, like, I had never heard of that, perhaps because the demographics of the city and the way that city works it was really unique. It wasn't until I joined the faculty at Wesley Seminary that I heard for the first time in my entire life, I'm talking about 3 years ago, for the first time, I heard the language of a multi-ethnic church. And it was really intriguing because in Los Angeles, I was able to be a part of two congregations. One was a Spanish language congregation. And you would think by default, well, they're all Hispanics, therefore that's a mono-ethnic church. Wrong. We had people from all over the Latin American nations. And yes, the service started in Spanish, but it was definitely a multicultural setting. And then is where you discover that if you think about it, music from Mexico, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Salvador, Puerto Rico, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile. I mean, they all have a unique taste, unique sound, unique expression. And so I was trying to learn what it was to be in a multicultural setting within that congregation. Afterwards, I was in an English-speaking congregation that had a lot of diversity, musicians from all over the world, and that was really unique, just kind of learning how to navigate doing music from all over the world. And we soon learned that sometimes it's a lot easier to write your own music for the congregation than actually trying to bring other music and trying to do translations and accommodate it to see if we can move it and stretch it into fitting some of the preferences of other cultures. So that was a really unique experience. And let me tell you some of the things where we probably failed. There was in that congregation a Sunday where we wanted to show how one of the songs that was written in the congregation has made it around the world. And so we had a film of a Korean church singing that song that was written in our congregation in Los Angeles. And we were going to show the video. And of course, through the melody, you could see that this is a song that was written here in-house and now made it to Korea. But one of the leaders had this idea, well, let's put the lyrics over the video. And a person went to Google Translate and put the English lyrics, Google Translate into Korean. We projected the video and we put those lyrics underneath. And then the Korean people in the congregation said, that's completely wrong. That's horrible Korean. Who did this? And the mistake was this. We had this great vision, wanted to show how we are doing multi-ethnic things, wanted to show how some of the music was even going around the world. And what we communicated was something wrong. The Korean people were actually a little offended, if you will, just because we were not intelligent and sensitive in understanding that it's not as simple as just kind of taking it and giving it a flavor that goes into another culture, that you really need to get into the other culture, understand languages, understand, and if you're unable to do that, then someone else can. You don't need to do it all. You need people around that can do the things that you can do. So quickly, I just wanted to share a couple of things. I know we're running out of time, but one of the things that I am a little concerned about when we talk about multi-ethnic ministry is this idea that it sounds a bit as if it's optional. People come and say, I've been thinking about getting into the multi-ethnic church kind of deal. And I have a problem with that because it really is not an optional thing. So some of our language needs to be revisited, and some of our assumptions need to be revisited. Let me see if I can share with you a little slide. I hope this is being seen right now. Normally in our congregations, you've seen this. There's a traditional worship and a contemporary worship. That's optional. If you prefer the style, more traditional, here's an option. We can offer that to you. If you prefer a contemporary worship setting, well, we can offer that. And I'm afraid in our language, we're beginning to see this idea that if you like the mono-ethnic church, well, we have it for you. But if you like that kind of thing, the multi-ethnic church, here's an option for you. And I think it has a problem. I think what it does, it completely distorts the mission of the church, which is a multicultural, multi-ethnic church. Go and make disciples to all the nations. So I would encourage, as we speak, that we will rethink sometimes the way we talk about it. I think it's great we emphasize this is a multi-ethnic church to draw attention to the fact that we're trying to create a new culture. But I think eventually the church needs to get rid of the multi-ethnic adjective, and it needs to become the norm. That is the Church of Jesus Christ. He's looking for a church that is reaching to everyone. So I would encourage that our movement towards multi-ethnicity or multiculturalism would be highlighting that for a moment and eventually just really dismissing that idea. What am I trying to say? What we want to change is the culture. What we need to change is the entire culture. And you know you've changed the culture when you've changed the underlying assumptions. It becomes just the way things are. And there's no other options. We don't do it any other way because this is who we are. We are multicultural. We are multi-ethnic. Another bit of a correction. I alone am not an ethnically diverse person. So sometimes I hear that often, like, you Latinos ethnically diverse, like you are an ethnically diverse person. And that's not true. As an individual, I'm just me. Like there's no diversity in me. Latinos, Blacks are not ethnically diverse alone as individuals. Ethnically diverse is a category of a group. Only a group can be ethnically diverse. There's no single individual that is not ethnic. Everybody is ethnic. So I think we need to begin to dismantle some of our talk and really kind of begin to challenge our thinking. But let me just say this. I think to change the culture, to change the underlying assumptions, you begin by what most of the panelists have mentioned. You begin to change the things people see. That's the way you change culture. You change the artifacts, you change what people are seeing, you change the way we talk. So you have to change the way you say things, the way you communicate. But just because you've changed what's being seen and what's being heard, does not mean you have a new culture. And that's extremely important because many people in the transition feel so happy. Well, we have diversity on a platform and on our flyers and the bulletins. That does not mean that the culture has changed. Culture has only changed when the assumptions have completely changed. When there is no way of doing it that is different than this inclusive and celebration of diversity. So I'll say those two. It needs to be inclusive. It needs to include, and it needs to be fairly included. It's no tokenism. It means that if we really are going to do this, everybody's opinion matters, and they all weigh in, and it's diverse. That doesn't mean we want everybody to turn into what we want them to be. Like, here's a Latino with this kind of flavor. No. We celebrate diversity. We celebrate differences, and when we celebrate it, in church as well. So that's another one. And here's one that I get a question on, well, how do I move from monoethnic to multi-ethnic? And we've heard great advice in the panelists, but one of the things that I would like to say is, would you be willing to submit to the spiritual authority of someone different than you? And I'm particularly speaking to majorities. Would you be willing to submit to the spiritual authority of a minority? And if the answer is not, I would actually say you're not ready yet. And we need to still continue to pray. But one of the things that I've discovered is I need to be willing to submit to the spiritual authority of an African-American pastor. I need to be willing to learn from them, to allow them to speak to me, not just in terms of teach me how to play gospel, but teach me how to serve and be disciple under your leadership. Teach me what it means to grow as a disciple within your context. So one of the things that I've learned is I need to learn how to submit myself. I want to lead. I love leading, and I think I have great ideas. But the reality is I've messed up a lot because I think I'm the right leader. And the reality is I need to learn how to submit under the leadership of other people before I can take people to those places that I've never been. Thank you.
Great stuff, Luigi. Really appreciate that, man. Loved your thought and just how you framed that from the context of just teaching and learning, and man, the growth that it takes to do this is sometimes underestimated by us. So lastly, we have Mark Patterson, who's going to share, and he's at New Beginnings in Indianapolis. So excited he's on the panel. Mark, why don't you share a little bit of your story and your context?
Yeah, so I'm just so honored to be a part of this panel, and I think I kind of round out this cast somewhat. So let me just kind of give you a brief look into my journey. I started off sort of like Felicia, maybe about 11 years ago, volunteering in my church. Just serving on the worship team, minding my business, and I've always loved to sing. I grew up Pentecostal in a church in New Jersey, and then we moved. That's it, Chase. We moved to Atlanta when I was about 8 years old, and by the time I was like 16. I started leading in I started serving with our college team, wasn't even in college, but I just loved the music so much and I always hung around them. And they started singing with our adult team, and then we launched a youth team for our church. And I was like leading worship every Sunday, every Wednesday for our youth church. We literally had in our chapel, like maybe 400, 500 kids that came weekly to church. And our youth pastor was like dynamic to the point that it really stretched me as a leader. And I didn't know it at the time. And so fast forward the tape a little bit, I started serving with the adult worship team a little bit more with my mentor at the time who was serving at my church. And just as a sidebar, I think a huge portion of transitioning from monoethnic to multi-ethnic is mentoring young people that are serving in ministry to really not just craft the mindset of future leaders, but really encourage them to just stretch beyond their limited understanding or what they even see. Because literally my introduction to multi-ethnic ministry was my mentor. And I would say the first moment that I collided with the idea that there was a bigger world than what I knew, he took our whole worship team to a Don Moen concert. And Don Moen just happened to be in town. And it totally shifted the way I thought worship was supposed to be executed, because something that I noticed was that the same destination, we were able to get there, but it was a totally different approach. And so it totally shifted my appetite for worship music. So I would say part of my college experience, I went to a school right outside of Chattanooga in Cleveland, Tennessee, called Lee University. Started singing with a vocal ensemble that was a cappella. And I was probably one of 4 Black people in this group. And it was awesome because it was one of those things where they were intentionally multi-ethnic as well, although it was a predominantly white environment. And it was based within the Church of God denomination. So there were times when we would be in environments where it would be totally white, then sometimes it'd be majority Black. We always had to just vacillate between those two. But what was great about our group was that, one, it was a cappella. So you didn't have the instrumental element that caused people to feel like, oh, well, this doesn't fit me, right? And then also you had the idea of all these, it was almost like the Disney singers that you hear at Epcot. So it's like really, orchestral, big, thick harmonies, all this kind of stuff. And you're singing hymns, and like, who doesn't like a good hymn, right? So you take that element and you just fuse it together, and you realize, like, wow, the same feeling that I got when I went to a Don Moen concert is that people long for, one, the authentic presence of God. And quite honestly, the vehicle is interchangeable, and depending on the audience, you just got to know what you need to work. And so a little bit more into my journey, I moved to Indianapolis about 5 years ago. Forgive me if I sound stuffy, y'all. I'm recovering from a little cold. So I moved to Indy around 5 years ago. Started serving at a church. Ironically, it was like the first time I was like brought on staff to serve. Now, mind you, I went from just, a kid growing up in church serving and accumulated all these experiences. And then simultaneously, I think I forgot one major piece. I started serving for a particular televangelist at the time who will remain nameless. But part of what I picked up from serving with him was he was so intentional about atmosphere, and he was addicted to hymns as well. And something that it was almost like God was just teaching me a lesson along the way, where I was almost having to be comfortable with the discomfort of not sticking to one genre, sticking to one group of people, sticking to one sound. It was always like another chapter, another approach, another type of execution to this thing we call worship But at the same time, it's like you literally, everybody's flying to Chicago. Like you're all going to the same place. And so if there was any takeaway that I could offer to this particular conversation, especially to those who might be in an environment where, let's be honest, because it seems like everybody who kind of spoke before, they are in environments where it's intentionally, it's like, okay, well, hey, we want to grab these folks who are over here. We want to have this particular sound. But what happens if you're in an environment where the only person who wants it to be multi-ethnic is you and the pastor, you know, or it might just be you, right? And I've kind of experienced that at some point. I just want to speak to that, just some key takeaways that really spoke to my journey. Number one, an easy way to infuse songs, whether it be even just tagging certain choruses or certain vamps, all you have to do is strip away the idea that, number one, we're trying to become something. I love how Luigi mentioned it. Like, we are the church. And I don't care how people might feel off-put by it. At the end of the day, when we go to Walmart, whatever's playing over the music ahead, you're listening to it and you're subconsciously dancing. When you go to a sporting event, you don't have a particular genre of music playing all the time. You get top 40. So people innately are going to initially say, oh, well, this is different or uncomfortable, but don't find yourself trying to make it something before it is that something, if that makes sense. So don't try to make it multicultural. Literally use the sound that's already in your house. Like if all you do is Fred Hammond and Ricky Dillard, take a Chris Tomlin song and put Hammond B3 organ on it. You know what I mean? Like, do what is natural to you. Like, don't be inauthentic, because the one thing I cannot do, I can't be Chris Tomlin. However, I can be Mark Patterson and sing a Chris Tomlin song, because the lyrical content speaks to my Christian walk. It speaks to what God is doing in my life. And I think what is so powerful about multi-ethnic ministry is that, yes, you know, me in and of myself, I love that, Luigi, that I'm not multi-ethnic, but as soon as I stand with, whether it's virtually through just learning the song or physically having somebody on stage that doesn't look like me, doesn't sound like me, it automatically bridges this gap that it's almost like, yeah, like, okay, maybe you have what I don't, and maybe I have what you don't, but together we have it all. And I think that's the beauty of this conversation. So just a couple other quick takeaways and I'm gonna get out the way. I think a key to the success of people like a Chris Tomlin, even on the pop side, of Katy Perry, all those people who seem to like have the world singing along, they always pick songs that sing themselves. I think a perfect example would be the anthem. Everybody sings it. I don't care if you're in a church, you know, that's in Australia, you're in Chicago, you're in Miami. I mean, music is interchangeable, but I mean, the lyrics, it literally sings itself. And I think I would challenge every worship leader, every music director, don't get hung up on the mechanics. Get hung up on the fact that there is a lyric, there is something in the heart of God's people that they want to sing to him. There's something that God wants to say to his people, and we are that bridge. And so we don't have to get hung up on how we do it, but most of all, let's just figure out, what is it that we need to say? What is God trying to say to us, and how can we communicate that through the sound of our house? And I think, you know, that would be the biggest takeaway that I picked up throughout my years. Santis, back to you.
Thank you, Mark. Man, that's great stuff. Great stuff. So we've come to that time where we kind of ask the questions. I know there have been a few that have been answered already in the conversation, and a few of our panelists have taken the time to answer the questions directly to people as they've asked them. But there are a couple things that came up in the questions that I want to just lift up for this group. And Josemar, if there are others that I'm missing, I'd love for you to chime in and ask those. And as you're answering the questions, because we're almost out of time, we're probably going to go to about 1:05, if that's okay. And we know if you need to hop off because of another appointment, we totally understand. But we did want to give at least 20 minutes to our Q&A time. So one of the questions was like, how do you deal with, how do you deal with stipends and You talked about paying for diversity. Like, how do you deal with that, just in terms of the amount, and who decides that? Do you decide that? Does the church leadership decide that? I think Brant addressed some of that because that was a question directly to him. But could you quickly, Brant, share a little bit of that with the entire group? Because I think you answered Michael's question privately.
Sure. Yeah. Abby would actually be able to do a little bit more with the hiring of musicians and stuff like that, because I know that that's what they do too. But for us, we took a little bit of a different approach in that we did interns. And we realized that instead of just paying for musicians, where you would just only get the talent or the playing or the singing, we would pay interns. You'd get the talent, but you'd also get the leadership. You'd also get the development into your process. And we got a lot more return on the investment because we got the whole person. So hiring an intern for, I think we'd pay like $250 for maybe 25 hours a month. It would include, weekend service stuff, but it would also get them in on leadership meetings and exposure to them. We got a far bigger return than just hiring someone to play an instrument, although sometimes you have to do that too. So a site that I want to turn you guys on to is ascensionworship.com. It's a new thing. You can hire local musicians. It's got a pay structure up there. People that want to go onto that in that organization have to do an audition, but it's a new thing that's raising up around the United States for musicians. So ascensionworship.com is what it is.
Excellent. Abby, you want to add anything to that, just in terms of your context?
Sure. Because we were a church plant and in Rockford, which is predominantly white area, we did have to be very intentional and to hire musicians and different people that would show the vision that we were going. And so we did. We just based it off of our budget, what we could afford, and we were given the privilege to pay $50 per musician for Sunday. Musicians did know that if they for Sunday, that also means that they're available for our rehearsal, and which it's on Tuesday nights. So if you're not available on Tuesday, then you're not available on Sunday. And that's just kind of how we did it. We have recently gone to an all volunteer, but because it's more natural for us. Now we've got a lot more people that love tribes and their hearts connected. And, we kind of live in a generation where people bounce between churches for different things, and that's okay. So we work with other churches as well. So yeah, that's kind of how we've done it. And our transition, I'll just add this, if anybody's in that place, we actually asked every paid musician, we said, this is what we're wanting to do. We feel like your heart's with us. So we feel like if we did this, that you would probably be for it, but this is our thought and this is how it helps everyone. So we casted vision, and most everybody that was a paid musician was willing to go volunteer.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Abby. Another question that has come up is just the question of how do you incorporate diversity when it relates to immigrants and refugees and people who are, because we tend to go English, Spanish first. What about people from African diaspora, Congolese, or maybe someone who is from Serbia who has transitioned into your community, or I think someone mentioned Korean. Like, what are some of your approaches to people groups who don't represent English speaking and primarily Spanish speaking people groups?
Well, so in truth, the area that we are reaching out to, which is the southwest side of Grand Rapids, it's predominantly the languages that are spoken there are predominantly Spanish and English. And so that's why we've been intentional in that area. But some of the things that I've been able to see in the past and even participate with as I've done different things traveling is a part of the incorporation when you are bringing something new into your worship environment is honestly, you don't always bring a new thing in with the anticipation that everyone's going to participate. You bring in things like specials to begin that kind of work, because you are introducing something new into the culture. And so eventually, as that new thing becomes a part of the culture, then you can introduce songs into your worship set. We're going to be singing in, in this language. We're going to be singing in Hindi, because we've also become a part of the Hindi has also become a part of our culture here. And it's not something that is so foreign and so new that you can't participate. So a part of that is, just like anything else that you're implementing into your culture, you bring it in some ways, you highlight it as something special, as something unique, but also have the conversation with your people to say, hey, this is not a one-time thing. We're introducing this to you, and this is something that's going to be an ongoing thing for our culture. And so your culture begins to evolve as individuals participate and come in and are regular staples in your community.
So I want to go back to a question that came up. Actually, I got it in the text last week. And this particular person said, you know what, I'm not watching the webinar. And I've texted them back and I said, why? I said, because you're going to have people who are paid full time, and that's not our narrative. And, it's fine for groups who that's their story, but we're a small church, we can't afford it. And so I want to go back to Felicia as someone who is a volunteer, and then invite any of the other panelists to share too. Just quickly, like, what would you say to that person in terms of how they can get started, how they can create some sustainability, small church, very little talent in musicianship. What would be your few things to say to them to help them get rolling, and others can jump in as well?
Well, I would definitely say you just work with what you have. I know when I first started out with the praise team that I was talking about, it was a new church, and the lady who was the worship leader knew that I sang, and she was like, Felicia, come on. And I was like, all right, I'm with you. And so I've been doing this for about 15 plus years, and I've never gotten paid. And I tell you, I think, I believe God supplies the need. God will send who needs to be a part of that panel, and as far as leading others into worship. I know the second praise team that I was a part of, that I had the privilege of leading, there were a lot of people who were not a part of a praise and worship team, and were very apprehensive about being a part of it, because they were like, well, we've never done this. We don't, and it wasn't what we were looking for. We're looking for a heart to worship. And I think God can use that, and he can build on that. And there was music ability there. And even if there's not a lot of music ability there, I believe if there is a heart to lead people into worship, you can build on the ability. I hate seeing, when you have all of this talent, but there's no worship aspect. The music sounds great, the singing, all of that is just woo-woo, but then where's the worship aspect of it? And so, hey, I say work with what you have. God will send you exactly what you need at that time, and you just build on that.
Very good. Anybody want to add to that, or? Sounds great. Another question that's come up, and let me just say, the person that sent me that text said, if you address this question, I will watch just for that question. And so they've been on both calls. So thank you for that. Another question for you is, like, what's been, how have you handled pushback? Like, how have you handled resistance? What's been your approach to the member that comes up and lovingly corrects you because you added Spanish, or says, that nobody here listens to that. Why are you doing that? So what's been your response to pushback, either through your congregation or through your leadership, maybe even from your pastor? Like, how have you responded to pushback?
I want to jump into this one. This is my favorite subject. So I think, number one, I want to preface this by saying, you have to be in line with the vision of your house. I heard somebody say this one time: if you have a vision and your pastor has a vision, that's division, and that just doesn't work. So I think if you have at least some creative freedom and liberty to do so, I think, number one, you have to be ready for the moment when people say, I don't like that. I don't think that works. Think about how many times songs go number one on the radio and everybody hates them. Like, everybody can't hate them because they went number one and people are calling and requesting them. You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain level of early adaptation that happens. And I always go by it's almost like a marketing number. Like, if I at least get like 20%, and there are people that I gauge as far as indicators in the audience, right? So there's the prayer warriors that are there at the 8 o'clock service at my church, right? They're kind of like Felicia. If the music is great and it's talented and all that kind of stuff, but there's no worship, they are not moved. So I have my eyes on them. Then there are other people in the congregation. I might look at if there's a patch of young people that might be at a later service. I'm kind of got my eyes on them. I have my eyes on certain indicators in the room to let me know, okay, this isn't just an experiment on, okay, these cool songs we can sing, but how is the corporate man engaging with the Holy Spirit right now in this moment? Because at the end of the day, I know my assignment is to kind of prepare the way that at least when the spoken word comes, it's not so hard for people to hear because they're not distracted by what they came in with. And they've at least connected with God already. So I think it speaks to your assignment, but look, you just got to know it's going to be there. It's coming. Don't pay attention to all the static. Just know exactly, number one, what your vision is, what it is that you're supposed to do. And if at least there's some collective engagement, yeah, try it, move forward. And don't be afraid to change it up. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at least give it like 2 to 3 times. New songs never work that well on the first time unless it's the anthem. But yeah, that's it. I'll leave it there.
If I could also to add a little bit to that, my bad, Abby. But one of the things too in education when it comes to your congregation, leadership, anyone, is the truth that our ethnicity is just as is eternal. It is not something that is just connected to our time here on earth. In Scripture and Revelation, when we see, in Revelation where there are every tribe and every nation, that talks about ethnicity, them being there gathered around the throne. And so if our ethnicity is one of the things that we take with us into eternity, it's not something that is just based upon being here on earth. I'm black now, I've always been black, and I'm gonna be black in heaven too. So there's a part of that expression that is absolutely needed, that we not only embrace, but we also allow to be a part of our worship gatherings. And so if we are individuals who selfishly say that another person can express an eternal part of who they are, then in some ways we are asking them to live not worship eternally. And honestly, that's just unfair. So I just think that's an important part of the piece of the puzzle for everybody.
Can I add?
Yep, go ahead.
We have been pretty fortunate to have our leadership and all of our staff on the same page in this reality that it's kingdom to be multi-ethnic. It's God's design, it's God's plan. But there have been a few people that would maybe push back once in a while. And here's my response. We grow up in a culture in America where us white people typically say, well, the slave owners did such and such, and we weren't part of that. Or Black people might say, well, and they experience it as a we and as a group. And I think our reality needs to become, and our paradigm shift needs to become, that we are all one. We're all one blood, and we're all in this together. This is God's design, and it's his plan. And so to someone who might push back, we say, well, maybe that might not be your preference of style, but we are creating a space for other people to worship. And as believers in Christ, our job is to serve one another in love. And so we do that through our expression of worship that is inclusive. Another way that we have done that is just creating an atmosphere within our team where everybody is together. Like, we don't have any issues between the sound team and the band or the singers. We just create an atmosphere that is that inclusive, atmosphere. So it kind of permeates to the other parts of the building. And that's what we've done, and it's worked for us.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Let's close out. I do want to say something in response to a question that came through that maybe everybody didn't see, but something that Luigi said, and I think he addressed it or I addressed it. Knowing Luigi's heart, there was a question about the statement that no one person can be multi-ethnic. And I think the question was from a person who is multiracial. And the context of what Luigi was referencing to was in the context of community, not in the context of a person's racial classification. And so
Right.
I think sometimes the myth is that a person who is a person of color is automatically makes something multi-ethnic, when that actually can be ethnic specific, even in a person of color context.
Right.
So
Can I address that a little?
yeah, real quickly, just in the context of community. Go right ahead, Luigi.
Yes, I want to make sure that it is very clear that we could all have diverse heritages. So, for instance, I'm from Colombia. I may have some Spanish and maybe even some native blood in me. But the fact that I show up into a group, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden we are multicultural or multi-ethnic, because I actually bring 3 different ethnicities into the mix. Because what that would do is it would make a homogeneous community that has diverse heritages a diverse community. So what I'm trying to say by that is that we need to make sure that we see diversity in a community, that it is really the church mission to have this difference having fellowship. So that was one of the things that I wanted to clarify, that sometimes by default we assume that, for instance, I would be an ethnically diverse person, therefore I must know more about how to do multi-ethnic ministry than other people that are homogeneous. Well, that is a myth. As an individual, I need to learn just as much how to be in community with different people from different heritages and celebrate all of that. So that is not to deny the fact that we have a rich heritage, but it is to say that just because we have a person with a rich heritage or a group of people, it doesn't mean we've reached the point that a culture is different. So that was one thing I wanted to clarify. And there was another question, if I may address it real quick, but I just lost it. The reason why I do think at some point we need to eliminate the multi-ethnic, I think there was a question about that. And let me just explain it this way. My wife is white, so our children are Latino, white, but I don't need to go around saying, hey, kids, hey, multi-ethnic kids, come over here, have dinner. Hey, multi-ethnic kids, it's time to go to a church. Multi-ethnic kids, like the reality is they just live in a new world where the default is, I don't need to be just affirming that. Maybe to other people, I need to be saying, hey, no, my kids are multi-ethnic, and yeah, they speak Spanish and they speak English. But once it becomes a culture, you don't need any longer that kind of language. You don't say, go Colts, my Colts are a multi-ethnic team. It's just a football team. And I would hope that we get to the point that we get to say, this is my family. They're not multi-ethnic, multi-racial kids. Call that multi-ethnic kid to come play with us. There comes a point where we should be able to say, hey, going to church means that we get to experience unity and diversity in a way that this world cannot produce.
Amen. Very good. That's a good way to close, man. Thank you for that. Really appreciate all of you joining us. Thank you to our panelists for their contribution to the conversation. We were able to deal with all the questions, and so we're really appreciative of that. Also, next week, we end actually the multi-ethnic worship learning lab, and we actually do it live. And the goal of the conversation is to have 3 to 4 churches who are willing to share their story, share their process, and then allow other people to ask questions and give insights. And so if you're a church that says, you know what, man, we've been part of this conversation and we love what we're hearing, but man, we'd love for someone to kind of coach us and walk us through this conversation, please submit your information to us. Let us know that you're interested, and we want to make sure that we include you in next week. It'll be a Zoom call format where it won't be webinar, where you'll be able to see everyone and hear everyone that is on by video. And so if you're interested in that, please let us know. Also, the week after we close out on multi-ethnic worship, we'll be dealing with multi-ethnic residency. So if you're a person that's interested in doing some of the things that Brant was talking about with internships and residencies, we're going to have a session specifically on that, not just about how can I diversify my staff, how can I increase my staff by not hiring staff. And there are a lot of churches that might be an option or something to consider, particularly if budget and staffing are one of those areas of concern. So thank you again for watching. I want to thank our panelists again for taking the time. I want to ask Josemar if she'll close us out very quickly in prayer, but we hope to see you next week or in the weeks ahead.
Gracias, Señor, por este tiempo de aprender. Gracias, Señor, por cada uno de los panelistas que estaban acá. Gracias, Padre, por lo que ellos quieren, Señor, que seamos una iglesia, Señor, para adorarte, que seamos unidos todos, Padre. Gracias por todo lo que ellos nos brindan. Ayúdanos, Señor, a entender lo que tratas de decirnos, Señor, a que tengamos una visión, Señor, compartidas, los mismos, Señor, para ti, para tu gloria, Señor, y que nuestra iglesia sea una representación, Padre, de lo que será el cielo, Señor. Te amamos y gracias por todo lo que haces por nosotros, Señor. Te damos el resto del día, Señor, de la semana. Amén.
Amen. Well, hey, we want to make sure that you continue to celebrate every time a disciple makes a disciple and every time a church multiplies itself until the Wesleyan Church has a transforming presence every zip code. God bless you. Thank you. Dios te bendiga. Bye-bye.